10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
There's no need to fear.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, cause I'm black.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Supa Black, an all-black panel podcasting experience where we talk about all things superhero, past, present, and future. From Marvel and DC to anime, there is no stone we will leave unturned as we take a deep dive into the genre of superpowered individuals and the worlds they inhabit. I am your friendly neighborhood host, Zuri Washington. I use she, her pronouns, and you can follow me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. That's Zuri with a Z, not Suri with an S. I'll leave it to the rest of today's Supa panel to introduce themselves. Take it away.
Hi, Michael Andreas. Pronouns are he, him, and you can find me on Instagram at Michael_Andreas.
Hey, and I'm Thomas Brazel. Pronouns he, him, and you can find me on Instagram at tbrazeldazzle.
And don't forget to follow the podcast itself at Supa Black Podcast on IG, or you can follow us on Twitter at Supa Podcast. But now that we are all assembled, let's get started. So today's topic of conversation, it's going to be our first review. We are reviewing The Batman, Matt Reeves' The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz and Colin Farrell, which every time I say Colin Farrell's name in relation to this movie, I'm like, was he in this movie? Like, I know he was, but every time I see the Penguin, I'm just like, is that the same person? Like, it's
Right.
insane. It's insane.
Yep.
The transformation, that makeup department nailed it.
Killer.
So good
Yeah.
for them. But yeah, we're going to talk The Batman, which I know for me and Michael is our favorite superhero. I know, Thomas, this is your first time making it on with us on the podcast. So can you tell us just a little bit about your favorite superhero first and foremost, so we can get an idea of where you're coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually is a tie. It's Spider-Man and Batman. And honestly, one of the first ever superheroes I ever saw on film was Michael Keaton's Batman. I was 4 years old when I saw it, and I heard the music in my living room because they were watching it on VHS back in the day. And I literally stopped playing with my toys and went into the living room and just saw that whole opening credits. And ever since, I was hooked to Batman. I just stood there and I actually stood and watched the film. And my mom tells this story when they actually went and saw it in theaters at that time, and it was 1989 or whatever, and it was like just packed in the theater. And that was when they were just like, they sold seats. They didn't care. You could sit in the very back, sit on the aisles. Like they just would be like, if we can get in, we'll get you in, you know. And I'll never forget her telling me when they went and saw that movie, because she was a huge Jack Nicholson fan. And I mean, after that, I started reading the comics. I love the cartoon. I got all the toys. So, yeah, I'm a huge Batman nerd and a big Spider-Man nerd because I always loved smart heroes. And I thought those two were very smart, intelligent heroes. And they also were, I mean, yes, Bruce Wayne's got a lot of money and stuff, but I felt they were like almost achievable in my eyes as a kid. Like I felt like if I got bit by a spider, I could be Spider-Man. If I got rich, I would be Batman. You know, like it was one of those things I felt like I could relate in a way to them.
Yeah, I always, what you said is like aligns with me and how I feel about Batman. I just think he's so smart. Like every once in a while I talk about Justice League Doom and when they steal the plans that are Batman's plans, but make them like lethal and all that stuff. He's just so smart because he always has a contingency. And I always like to have A, B, C, D through Z plans just in case something goes wrong. And that's what I really appreciate about Batman. Of course, he always has his blind spots, but for the most part, otherwise it would be like not interesting to watch. But yeah, and Danny Elfman's score in the original Batman series is just so good. I just always am like, wow, Danny Elfman did that. Can you imagine the lead singer and creator of Oingo Boingo?
Yeah,
He knows how to craft a tune, that one.
He
He
crafts the
knows what
tune.
he's doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so good. And Tim Burton's vision, of course, of how like that was the first time that Gotham at least had some character to it. But what I found in this movie was that I felt the city breathing. And there was
Mhm.
people have complained, there's been some complaints about the length of the film. And they could have cut some stuff out, but I was very happy with it because in those moments I was on pins and needles, like what's going to happen next. I felt in the comic books, Gotham is like, what's it? There's like an evil wizard that lives under Gotham, and like, and like that's the reason why Gotham is as messed up as it is, because he's always like creating chaos or whatever. So I felt a sense of foreboding at every moment, and Gotham was a city that breathed, and it was New York City. And I just, as a native
Hmm.
New Yorker, do you know how much it pissed me off when I can't remember who said it, or it was probably Zack Snyder or someone, but either way, that Gotham is actually New Jersey and that Metropolis is New York, and I said, "Boo!
Right. I
Boo!
remember that.
What are we
I'm gonna
even
be real with
talking
you though. I've always, as an outsider, like I've never lived in. I mean, I have lived in New York City, but only for a few years. As an outsider, I always kind of viewed Gotham as Detroit and Metropolis as New York City. As somebody who didn't
Mm.
come from either city, that's kind of how I viewed the two,
Interesting.
comparatively to cities in the United States. Just because Detroit just always has had this like grit to it and this like
Mhm.
work. Man, you always think of like the Ford company, Ford factory being there and the hardworking people and blue collar. So that's what I've always thought of. Me personally, definitely not Jersey, New York City for me,
Not
but yeah.
No, because well, more than anything, it felt well. First of all, Gotham. Gotham is New York City. Like when people not just in the context of the comic books, but like there's a Gotham Hall in New York City. There's like
Mhm.
when people talk about New York, there are various buildings that are like Gotham something. So that's one reason that I always had thought it was New York City. But it's also um the New York that's today, that's like the Disney New York, that's the Disneyfied kind of New York, and Tokyo, big screens everywhere, like the Japan kind of feel of it all, is not the New York of the 1980s and 90s. There's lots of hookers on the street and lots
Right.
of people
Right.
doing drugs. So,
Yeah.
so it's just it was and I can imagine the original, like the more campy version, the Adam West version of Batman. I
Mhm.
don't know if that was New York. Maybe a New York in the 1950s and 60s might have been more like that. But overall, in the most recent iterations that have been very dark and very grounded in some sense of reality, Gotham has always represented New York more than anything to me. Plus, I know that even though like we don't have an asylum per se, it's not like there's like an Alcatraz in New York, but
Mhm.
we do have our criminal justice system is very well known. So I would imagine
Mhm.
that they would base it off of something that was like known enough in popular culture
Yeah.
that uh that New York City just seemed like the most direct connect to me. But it's interesting that you say Detroit, because that's the first time I've heard that, and I like that for like a
Yeah, now that I've lived in New York, I definitely see that that's more of what my perspective was before I lived there. Especially in this
Mhm.
last movie, Gotham was definitely New York, like in this last film for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but just as an outsider, as somebody who hadn't lived there before like the past 5 years or so, all my life growing up, you know, all you see in New York is like you see the pretty buildings and Times Square, and that's what you kind of know New York as. So for me, that always kind of felt more like Metropolis, and like a city like Detroit kind of felt more like a Gotham to me then. But now, no, that Gotham is New York for sure.
So, what did y'all think of the movie? We'll talk about like the nitty gritty details of it, but overall, what were your overall uh, thoughts about how the movie came across?
Yeah, I roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really felt that it really represented the comic books I remember growing up and reading. I mean, from the start, the minute you hear the narration, like I really was transported, and I love the cinematography because I started realizing how visually it felt like a comic book in terms of the angles, the lighting, the focus points. And so to me, I felt there was such a care given to the source material that was exciting to see. But it felt fresh. That honestly to me, I think was is a difficult thing to do after the trilogy we recently have with Christopher Nolan's. And I was very proud of the originality of the risks that they took. I mean, that's how I describe it. It was fresh, exciting, and to me, it felt like watching a mini series on HBO. That's why I
Mm.
didn't have a problem with the length because I was like, when season two? Because I was just like, at the end, I'm like, oh man, darn, there's another episode or something. It just kind of had that momentum, right? And just the evolution of character. I think that was clearly the focus point for Matt Reeves with this. And I really felt like the characters were flawed, and I'm like, I'm eager to see how they could continue to grow,
Mm.
and how these things affect them. And so, yeah, for me, it just was alive. I think that's the right way. Very balanced film as well, for a Batman film, which I think is a hard thing to do. There's such enigmatic characters throughout, but I felt like everyone was in the same world. They understood the assignment and they went for it, and it just felt like just even to me. And so, yeah, I mean, I still think about it, and I applaud that because if I'm coming out of a superhero film and I'm still talking about it a good now what 5 days after or so I saw it, that's a plus. So
Mhm. Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, I loved it, and you know, and I think I might have said this in my superhero origin. Coming into this, I had no interest in seeing another Batman movie. Not because I don't love Batman, but just because I was so tired of seeing a new Batman every time I go to the theater. Like I wanted something I could dig into and actually, you know, appreciate and see the character grow and develop over any amount of time. It feels like nobody gets more than 2 or 3 shots at it, and then they just start over again. But with all that said, I really, really enjoyed this, and I think the thing that I enjoyed the most was their approach with his entry point. Like where they came in with this story to me was the perfect way to tell a new Batman because we don't need to see Thomas and Martha get shot again. We don't need to see him training again. We don't need to see we got all that. But to get to a point where and on the other flip side of that, I feel like Affleck's Batman, we missed too much. Like
Too
we didn't
much.
see any of the history. We didn't see what happened with Robin. We didn't see what happened with we all we got was like a snapshot of what all his history was. So I feel
mhm.
like this was a perfect entry point for Robert Pattinson and for this version of Batman because it's far enough in that we get past the stuff that we already know, but we get to see him still be fresh and still like finding his way. And like even the perfect scene for me is like when he and I love the gadgets in this one, but when he was
Mhm.
using the bat suit and it turned into the wingsuit and he was
Oh
using it
yeah.
to fly off the building and then pulled the parachute in the wrong spot and you know and
Yo,
like bounced off that train which would
that
kill
train
any normal
knocked the
human being
piss
by the
out of
way.
him.
Yeah.
um but that was like the perfect like microcosm of where he was as a whole in this film. Like
Yeah.
he had an idea of the crime fighter that he wanted to be, but was still finding his way and was still
Yeah.
making mistakes and was still, you know, learning and growing and giving us something to hopefully build towards and see more of what he becomes in the future. So I loved it. There were a few nitty gritty things that didn't necessarily jive with me, but we can get into that later. I don't want to start on a down note. I'm just gonna say overall, I would say if I out of 10, I don't know how we're doing the review, the ranking, but out of 10, I would give it a solid 9. I really thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's my score. I think, unlike Thomas, though, at the very beginning, I was unsure about
Mm,
the narration aspect of it and the music. For some reason, I don't know if it's because I was in IMAX, but it was so loud and
Mm.
not in a way that like felt comfortable. Like it was bad. And but it was loud and it was funny. My choir teacher from high school had said, he said the score was so basic. Like he was just, that's what he harped on. He was just talking about the score, and I was like, okay. And I heard what he was talking about. I think Danny Elfman's score is so, it's just the Batman score. Every time I listen to it or every time I hear certain cadences and yada yada yada, it's just gives the vibe so well of Gotham and of
mhm.
Batman. And I think the Giacchino's, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but Michael Giacchino score was a little too, like, it was like three notes on a keyboard. Boom, 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 boom. It sounded actually like the first three chords of the Empire song from Star Wars. It sounded like
Yep.
ba 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 ba, just over and over
Yeah.
again. And I was like, okay, can we go somewhere with this? Like it didn't really go anywhere. And so at the beginning, I was unsure about the environment that they were setting up, but overall, I think I stand by this, and I want to see it again to confirm. But I think, for my money, it's the best Batman live action movie that I've seen. I think Robert Pattinson fit both Bruce Wayne and Batman. Um, and that which has never happened. There has never been
Mhm.
someone who has been able to do both and have me be like, cool, this is
Mhm.
good. Usually
Yeah.
someone's better at one or the other, or Michael Keaton, who's not really good at either, but he's a really great actor. Even though every time I look at him, I'm just like, you're not Bruce Wayne, you're just not. um but I think what because people will say, like, but what about the Dark Knight? And I'm like, I hear you, but I have to watch it again. I haven't watched it in a while. But that being said, a lot of the stuff surrounding the Dark Knight, I always wonder if the Dark Knight would be as popular as it is today if Heath Ledger had not have died. And so,
Mm.
because of the cultural mourning and loss that
Mhm.
we went into the movie with, it kind of like glommed itself onto everyone's like heart and onto, just the whole mythos of it all. And I still love the movie. I still think it's a great movie. But this is also one of the only Batman movies, if not the only live action Batman movie, that actually focuses on the Batman instead of on his rogues gallery. This is about the fucking Batman. He is a detective. He is maligned by the police department. People fear him. People don't want anything to do with him. What his journey is like. We have dealt with so many Bruce Waynes or Batmans that are already at, like, they're in their mid 30s. They kind of already get the whole Batman thing. Or we have a couple older Batman, specifically thinking of Ben Affleck's, who's probably in his like 40s at that point, or early 50s at most. But he's toward the end of his tenure, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Right.
Right.
And so I feel like this was the only movie that was really about Batman.
Yeah, that to me, that was the big thing. I mean, when someone asked me about comparing it to The Dark Knight, I personally was like, I cannot compare because they are in two different directions. And I said, this is my thing about The Dark Knight, and it's not a knock about it, is that you had a performance that is going to live down in history as one of the greatest performances on film of all time. I mean, it is to do character the way Heath Ledger did, the pressure because he's coming after the great Jack Nicholson and all this stuff, and everyone was questioning why in the world would you cast this guy? He's only done like Knight's Tale and this and that.
10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, right. And he went in there and he made it his own. And that's what I talk about with Robert Pattinson. I feel like he went in there, he made it his own. they made it their own overall, and it was about the Batman. And I think that's the difference. There's balance. Whereas Dark Knight is Heath Ledger up here, and then the rest of the film is like good, but he supplants the film to me.
Yep. And even after Heath, there's like what's his name? Thomas. No, that's not the my brain wants to say Thomas Jane, but they look alike. It's whoever played Harvey Dent.
Oh, Aaron Eckhart.
Yeah, Aaron Eckhart.
Yeah.
I would say it's like Heath Ledger, then Aaron Eckhart's performance, like simply him just in the hospital scene,
Yeah.
like you know, far and above surpasses anything Christian Bale is doing in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Don't care. Literally don't care about anything he's doing in the movie because those performances were so good. And what I liked is that everyone was so evenly matched in this movie and was given enough material to shine in the moments that they shone, but not to supersede what the Batman brought to the table.
Yep.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Although I did think that Gordon said Jesus too many times. Jeffrey Wright said Jesus minimum 4 times. I swear to you. Every time, because the first time I was like, whatever, but then I heard it again and I was like, have I heard this before? And then the third time I was like, he's saying it again. Like it was. Jeez.
Everybody's got to have a catchphrase, you know.
That's right. That's his catchphrase.
You're probably gonna hear that a lot in Gotham PD, so you better settle in.
Right.
Just going back to the score a little bit. I agree, and I think they played that minor version of Ave Maria to death for me. Like it was like that. It was almost to the point where I was like, and then he sang, and then the Riddler sang it at the end. So I was like, I guess that kind of ties it in. But for the most part, I'm like, why this song? Like, what is it about this that's like, I don't know if they're just trying to create an atmosphere with it or tie it in. Because I think that song is sung a lot at like Italian funerals. And so I think they were like, maybe, I don't know if they were Catholic funerals, I guess. And I don't know if they're just trying to tie more of a, you know, crime family aspect in with that. I was kind of lost as to the reason for that.
I know why. Because and also I think it was done too much. I think it should have been done 3 times. It was done like probably 5 or 6. Ave Maria was sung by a children's choir when Thomas Wayne announced his candidacy for mayor.
Okay.
And I believe I think that's what he was doing. He was talking about something on
right. Yeah, I remember that scene.
And there was a choir being like Ave Maria, just singing. But then they did it again and it was minor and I was okay with it being minor, but then they did it a bunch of times and then the Riddler sang it. So I think it was done too much, but that's the direct reason, because Riddler says he was there when Thomas Wayne announced his candidacy.
Right.
Maybe
and he was in that picture.
He could have been a child in the choir. I don't really know.
He was. He was.
Right.
He had a question mark around his own face when they were going through all the evidence and stuff like that in his house, I guess.
Right.
Yes.
In his apartment.
There was so much in that apartment
I completely missed that the children's choir sang that song. I didn't catch that at all. So that makes it make a little bit more sense to me, but still it was a little bit overused for my personal taste.
3 songs in the whole or not 3 songs, 3 like musical underscorings that happened in the entire piece, it felt like. And then it would the kind of breakthrough would be like the really emo music, that spoken word music, which I was like, okay, it's okay, it's fine. I think I could have done without any of those songs, in fact, and more score. But oh well.
Well, I'll add about the score one thing. For me, because I felt it was such that noir feel of almost like Chinatown, reusing that mysterious melodic, and I think that's why it was so basic, is like to be able to use just those chords throughout to kind of set up the like, we're in a mystery zone, something's happening in the air, something's in the way. And I think that's the only thing for me, I think that's what I liked about the score was I thought it reflected this inspiration of film noir,
Mm,
in that
hmm
just simplisticness of it. But yeah, if I'm going to compare it, oh nah, yeah, nah, it's not a Danny Elfman, any by any means, and so that I think that was like it's kind of tough for Michael. I wonder if that was just like the director really trying to be like, I wanted to feel like this. You could tell there was like these inspirations from other cinema
Sure.
that they were using. So that's my only defense of it.
Yeah.
Boo. Just kidding. But yeah, I think um kind of moving on to just all the performances. I thought Jeffrey Wright was perfect. It was fine. There was nothing to write home about with Jeffrey Wright, but he was fine.
Mhm.
But Zoe Kravitz, I was worried about Zoe Kravitz because I've only seen her in two things, I think. One was Mad Max Fury Road, I think.
Mm, mhm.
Um,
Mm.
and the other was the television remake of High Fidelity, which I thought she was not great in. She's not funny. She's just not funny. So it just didn't it just didn't work for the type of person that she is. She's a beautiful girl, and I've always thought so because like if you have Lenny Kravitz and Lisa Bonet as your parents, like if you birthed an ugly child, I'd be concerned. But like
That's a genetic gold mine, is what that
that's
is.
genetic
Yeah.
gold mine. Like what? Wild.
That's the
Those
jackpot.
cheekbones. Um, she just that just wasn't her thing. And so when I watched High Fidelity specifically, I was like, ugh, nepotism. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. So when she was cast in this movie, I was like, I get why she was cast, but I hope that she's good. And I thought she was for the overall picture of Selena Kyle, I think she is the best representation of Selena Kyle that has been on the big screen. I love Michelle Pfeiffer because the camp of it all is stupid. Like it's just dumb. um
Yeah.
but she's I watched it recently. Oh, she says life's a bitch and so am I, and I was like, yes, okay. But which I can't remember watching as a child, so I have a feeling that we watched a very like PG version when I was younger.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that Zoe gave, and I was so glad they kind of went for the long Halloween plot of it all.
Yeah.
Where I was, because I literally was like, oh, they ran into Falcone. Oh, is she gonna be his daughter? Are we gonna do this plot?
Mhm.
And I was so excited. Like I knew they were gonna do. I felt like they were gonna do it. So when they finally copped up to it, I was like, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was so good. I could tell just from that alone that they really did their research, which has been one of my main issues with DC extended universe things in general, is that they're like, here's the biggest plot points from 5 books all smashed into one movie. And I'm like, but why? Can we
Right.
Yeah.
is there no nuance? Is nuance dead? Like,
Right.
so I thought they did. I thought she did a really great job. Of course, she looked great, but I also felt there was like a genuineness to her. She's a young Selena Kyle who's still trying to figure out her mother died. She's an orphan.
Mhm.
She and Bruce, though she doesn't know who he is, they align on a certain level. And I also was like, she's like these rich white people, blah 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 blah. I said, oh my god, are we going here in a Batman movie? I always get excited when comic books. That's how I felt during Falcon and Winter Soldier too. I was like, oh my god, what are we
Yeah.
talking about? Is this
Yeah.
happening on a national scale in a really big movie? My brain was exploding. They also said something about cops too that was like, I looked around the theater too because I was like, is everyone here mad? Because
Am I still safe here? What's happening?
Right.
they said something like something about the cops being dirty, and then someone was like, well, they're cops, and I was like,
Yes.
I was screaming. I have to watch it again just for that line because I thought it was so good. I'm gonna write it down and use it forever. But yeah, I thought her performance was great. Colin Farrell's performance was really, really good. Though I've been talking to people. I saw a couple complaints about why didn't they just get a fat actor? Because why didn't they just get a fat actor? What was the point of being like, we're gonna get Colin Farrell and put like all this stuff on him? James Gandolfini would have been a wonderful choice if he was still alive. Because
Yep.
I feel like the performance that Penguin was giving was very in that realm of Sopranos,
Yeah.
mafia
Yeah.
boss, yada 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 yada. But I
For
don't know
Absolutely.
what you
me,
guys think
for
about that.
me, Colin Farrell, yes, there was a lot. For me, he looked more, I thought of him as more scarred than fat. Like, I didn't look at him and think, oh, here's a guy in a fat suit. I looked at him as this is a guy whose identity is being totally just, it's a mask. You know what I mean? Like, it's the scarring, it's the gold teeth, it's the, all of
Mhm.
that is what I came away from looking at more than, whether he was fat or not. I didn't even, he could have not been fat. I don't, that's not the defining physical characteristic that I came from. I just was like, they completely transformed this guy. I mean, this does
Yep.
not look like any version of Colin Farrell, the heartthrob guy that you've known from like the early 2000s and whatever.
Hmm.
All of his accent was erased, all of his because he's Irish and he has a thick
Yeah.
accent. His
Yes, he
accent
does.
was
Yeah.
gone. He didn't look anything like himself. So for me, it wasn't a fat thing. It was just it almost felt like a Thanos kind of thing. Like it felt
Hmm.
like I was looking at somebody who was just playing somebody completely different than what they look like in real life. And it didn't really look to me like they were trying to focus in on him being fat per se.
Right. No, they
Um,
never talked about it, to be fair. I don't know in the context of the comic books what they discuss about the Penguin. I know that in recent iterations, like he has a limp
Right.
more so than it's like, oh, he's fat so he waddles. Like I think that has been older iterations, and people are just so accustomed to seeing actors of at least some kind of size
mhm,
portraying, even if it's just that they're slightly above average
yeah.
weight for their height.
There's
But like,
but there's been so
yeah,
many iterations though. Like even in
I
the
know.
even the show that was on Fox now that I can't Gotham.
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 Um, the guy that played him wasn't even close to overweight. I mean, he was a skinny guy who, I thought, over the course of the series played him in a very interesting way. But like you said, he had that walk. He had that, that was his deformity.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that there've been so many different there've been so many different versions of all these characters that it's like
Right.
as long as you find something that's nuanced and fits in with the story and is telling it in a compelling way, then you really can't. It's tough to go wrong. Like
I
you
think they
have to really try to be off base.
Right. I think they purposefully actually avoided the any talk of size. The only thing that ever happened during the course of the movie was when Falcone called him a gimp. Um and and of course, which is a slur
Hmm.
for disabled community members,
Right.
yada yada yada. But that was very purposeful because he meant to hurt him. He meant to
Yeah.
cut him.
Right.
And that was the one thing that would make him uh go a little crazy. So I think they were I think they were conscious of it. It's unclear to me if a fat suit was used, because most of the time I didn't actually see his whole body. I saw like
Right.
this
Right.
Yeah.
up, and the only time I
Hmm.
remember seeing his whole body was when there were pull out moments when they kidnapped him from the car and were interrogating him. But I still couldn't really tell what was going on. But I guess, like, because Oswald Cobblepot usually has like the shape of a penguin, so he's like, um,
Yeah.
Right.
so that's just usually the stereotype. But they clearly weren't going fully for that anyway. Um, I speaking of rogues gallery portrayals, I do think it's I was really curious what was going to happen with the Riddler, which of course we knew from the trailers that they were going in a very like dark Zodiac killer kind of direction,
Hmm.
as opposed to the campier version that we're more accustomed to seeing. Um even in Batman the animated series, to some extent, he was fairly campy, just not as campy as Jim Carrey.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still, there was a lightness to the Riddler until he was about to kill someone, and then you're like, oh wait.
Yeah.
This Riddler was never, this was not a fun Riddler. Like, it was always like, you're gonna die, someone's gonna die, something's gonna happen. But Paul Dano, I love Paul Dano, he's a great
Mhm.
actor. He's a great actor, so I was never worried about it, but I was just curious, and it came across, I think, exactly the way that they wanted it to. I heard that he put duct tape on his face during, like,
Saran wrap.
saran wrap,
Saran
that
wrap.
thing, saran wrap, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Ugh." um,
Yeah.
that's a lot, but he put saran wrap on his face. Too many stories of these Batman people who play Batman villains doing wild things. Just
The
like,
most. They do
just
the
doing the
most.
most.
It's crazy.
Do we have to do all of that? I don't know if we
Uh,
have to do all of that, but
all
um
in.
uh, all in or nothing. But I appreciated it. It was really good. He was really, even in his creepiness, he was still somehow funny.
Mhm.
There was still,
Mhm.
like, every once in a while he would say something, I'd be like, "Ah!" Like, oh my god. I can't believe he said that, and B, why was that funny? Should I question my own
Yeah.
thoughts? Um but I, I thought the breadcrumbs that they just did such good work. That script, that screenplay deserves an Oscar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's really hard to
Mhm.
do, to be like, it's a mystery and we're leaving clues everywhere, and, like, when someone flashbacks, they're like, oh, I remember I saw that person in the coffee store, and the blah, 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 blah. You have to always make sure you are on your P's and Q's, so that there are no goofs or mistakes, like, oh, actually we forgot to put the cup in that scene, so it's not there when they talk about it later. um so there was just a lot of really good work from the team overall, and
Yeah.
Paul Dano was able to, like, bring that all to life. When I saw him, when he would first appeared in the mayor's house, because I didn't know what was happening at the beginning, I was like, who is that Thomas Wayne? What time period are we in? I don't know what's
Yeah.
happening.
Right.
I was
Yeah.
very confused. I said, is that Wayne Manor? Is that Bruce Wayne? But I was like, we're in the middle of the city. I don't think Wayne Manor should ever be in the middle of the city. So that was confusing to me. But it made more sense once it became the mayor, because it's like, that's what do they
Wasn't
call it?
Wayne Manor in the middle of the city though? Was there a Wayne Manor, or was it all in the
The
tower? I feel like it
manor
was
the
all in
manor
Wayne Tower.
They were
had burned down, they said, and now he was in the tower at Wayne Enterprises.
Yes,
Because
he's in the
even when
that's why.
Whatchamaface
Mhm.
throws the bomb away, Alfred
That was in
throws
the
the
tower.
bomb. They show, yeah, but was he anywhere? Was he ever? That's where the mail was coming. So is that where they lived? Did they just live in
Mhm.
Wayne Tower?
Yeah,
Like
that
when he
was
Maybe
drove
as
the
a mayor.
motorcycle, even when he drove the motorcycle back to the Bat Cave, he
yeah,
drove underneath Wayne Tower for that. So I think it was
yeah.
all. I don't think there was a manor in this. I think it was
You said
all in
No,
the
that
tower.
they said it would burn down, Thomas?
yeah, there was a moment between him and Alfred where they talk about how Wayne Manor had burnt down after some event that happened.
Mm,
And so that's why they were in the tower. Basically
I
like
got you.
almost like a fancy penthouse.
right.
But yeah, and so I thought that was very interesting. What I loved about every little detail is that it tapped into the psyche of each character. Um, like with Paul Dano, for example, I just really loved. I mean, he talked about how he was a kid, he loved puzzles and things like that. It's the Riddler,
Mhm.
but just the idea of he's in this small apartment, like in New York, and he's got everything everywhere that he's working on, and even the neighbors don't realize this dude's got all this going on, you know. And he's masking up, and he's on these social media video platforms, and that's his community. Because when you see him, you like, no wonder he's unhinged. His friends are rats and the people he talks to on the phone, you know. And what I loved is that once the mask came off, that's when he was truly scary. Like that was the most scariest stuff. When he was unmasked, you were like, yeah, lock him up. You know, it's like this
Oh yeah,
guy
when
is
he
not.
turned around in that chair,
Yeah.
When he
Oh,
turned
at
around
the
in that chair in the
coffee
diner,
place?
that
Yeah,
was
the
like
diner.
that was the most terrifying moment of the whole movie for me. It was like when he
Yeah.
turned around and he just had like this regular face, and it was like,
Dude just shot a
what?
guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sniped the dude
yeah.
across the street and was like, I just wanted some pumpkin pie. I was like, oh my Lord. And
And then they slapped his head into the thing, and I said, ah!
yeah, I did too. I said, poor Paul Dano in every film, he gets beat up. I said, he
He
must
does
be.
get beat up.
I was like,
He has a punchable face.
that's what everyone says. He has a punchable face. I feel so bad for the guy, but he's making a living off of it. Bless him. Uh,
Great.
but
Bless
yeah,
him.
he when and he's doing this thing with his mouth and stuff, like and when they had him down, and I just thought that he tapped in so much of like the quirkiness, which at times would be funny, but also you go, yeah, this guy here, this is the early stages. Wait until he starts to really figure out what he's capable of. Oh, we're in trouble, you know.
Yeah. He
Right.
ain't
And
right.
Mhm.
what was
He ain't
so
right.
good, what was so good was when he finally met Batman, and he was
Mhm.
like, "You inspired me. You are my muse. Like, this is why I did this, because I saw what you were doing and I knew I could do something too." Because what's interesting is that the Rogues Gallery, I'm so grateful that they really harped into the mafia of it all, because I always think that that's one of the most important parts. The
Yeah.
actual mafia and how the villains take over those mafia strongholds. The Falcones, the Maronis, I can't remember the other family that I think that gets added into the animated series. But in any case, all of those mob families that control Gotham, these villains see, oh, this is how I control this place. I become a mob boss. So you have Dr. Freeze with his stronghold of ice. You have the Penguin with his place. You have all of the Ice Lounge. You have all these different people, which I think the Harley Quinn show did a really good job of doing. They were like, we control this part of Gotham, just so you know. This is
Yeah.
Mhm.
Baintown. um,
Right.
but I think that this movie did a better job than Gotham did of starting that seed, and I'm excited to see where it goes in that
Yeah.
vein. But also it's always I've said before, what came first, the chicken or the egg, the Batman or the villains? And so the Batman, they have that trial in the animated series where they put Batman on trial because they're like, it's his fault, it's his fault, it's his fault. It's not us. We don't blame us. We're innocent victims of the Batman making us into derelicts and crazy people.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's a combination of both, right? Like, it's that they saw the Batman and they felt encouraged to be their truest selves, because the Batman is
Mhm.
Bruce Wayne's truest self. And the
Yeah.
Joker, or not the Joker, sorry, the Riddler saw that in him, but still didn't know it
Mhm.
was Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. Oh, that's the most brilliant
I
acting
literally was
and
like,
writing.
I
I
was so,
said, Woo!
I was like, there's a camera. What's happening? Does everyone
I
know
Oh
now?
yeah,
know.
that was great. That was
Great.
great. You like, did he figure it out? And then it was
Right.
like,
No,
oh, I was
Oh
so
no,
man.
cringy. I was like, no, this
cringe.
too early for them to
I
know who he
know.
is.
I
They
was like,
can't know his
how,
secret
man?
identity now.
Yeah.
See, cringe.
That was great.
That was
It was
great.
That
so
moment was
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
Because usually the Riddler is one of the ones that gets one of the ones that either gets the closest, or sometimes he knows, it depends on the version. But because he is that clever, because he knows Batman's that clever and yada yada, he's usually one of the ones to know. And so I thought that was such a good push and pull, and the tension was so,
Yeah.
like, I was leaning forward like, what is gonna
And he was smart enough
happen?
not, and Batman was smart enough not to tip his hand and not to, not to feed in and to confirm any of it. He just strung him along just long enough to find out, does he really know, or is this something else? Am I going to have to destroy this camera and all this evidence? Or are they just going
Right.
to think he's a crazy person, rant and raving? They won't believe what he says. What's
Right.
going on here? What am I going to have? You could see him like figuring out, like all putting the pieces together, like figuring out how he was going to have to deal with this entire situation.
Yeah.
It was very cool, I thought.
Very cool. You
Now,
know
Zuri,
what?
I gotta say though,
Oh,
I
yeah, go
gotta
ahead.
say, this might be where our paths diverge just a little bit,
Fight.
just a
Okay.
little bit.
All right.
Um, I wasn't a huge fan of like the emo Bruce Wayne. I just wasn't. And I understand that he's younger. I understand why the choices were made. I get that.
I
And I
just think it was
thought
the haircut,
Pattinson's
honestly.
performance as this version of Bruce Wayne was great. I thought his performances as Batman, and then the way that he was, the detective stuff, all of that, 100% nailed it. I didn't love, and there's one line in particular that just totally took me out, and that was when he looked at Alfred and told Alfred, "You're not even really my father." That to me is like such a teenage thing to say to somebody that I'm like, that's not really that didn't feel like a Bruce Wayne line to me. It just didn't. And it felt like it felt too immature for me, I guess. And so
Mhm.
I like I said, I just wasn't a huge fan of the take. The hair was distracting for me, and
I
it was
honestly think if he had gotten a haircut, it would have been fine because
yeah, the
I
hair.
hated that hair.
It may have been the hair
Oh.
that put him so much in the emo vein for me. Maybe that's why
Yeah.
I was just thinking
Yeah,
like
because
this
he
is
looked like
emo
Tobey
Bruce Wayne
Maguire
the
in
whole time.
Spider-Man 3, and no one needs that.
Right.
Yeah. True. True.
Yeah. So that's my only takeaway. Like I would say his performance as Batman and his performance and the emotional beats that he hit as Bruce Wayne were great. I just thought that overall take of Bruce Wayne didn't exactly, because I think I'm just so still grounded in the way he is in the comic books and the way he is in the
Mhm.
animated series, where
Mhm.
he's this playboy and he's this. But even this version is so far from what you would expect a crime fighter to be that I could see why it works. It just wasn't necessarily my favorite Bruce Wayne take.
The reason why I didn't mind it, and again, I hated the hair. I continue to hate the hair. I will always hate the hair. But the reason why I didn't mind it was because I've never read year two. I've seen year one, and I think I read year one. But I I think without seeing Bruce grow up, and without seeing like his teenage years, this kind of gave it an inkling into the tension, or at least the tension that they built for this purpose, in this particular version between him and Alfred, because he was being a bitch to Alfred, and I was like, "What? This man raised you? How dare you? He's done so much for you." But I think, the line I think about when I think about their relationship is Alfred says to Bruce, "I could teach you how to fight, but I didn't know how to like raise a child." And so,
Yeah.
we're dealing with the MI6 version of Alfred, the one that goes toe to toe and like will kill people and is probably a bodyguard more than he is a butler. Um, and so that version of Alfred, who when Bruce asked to be trained was like, "Sure, I can do that. This is how I can connect with this child."
Mm.
So at some point, at some level, we are dealing with an emotionally stunted Bruce Wayne. We are. He
Yep.
he can't be. He's definitely not older than like 28.
Mhm.
Um, I would
That's about
say
where I put him.
that's about
Late
Yep.
right.
20s, maybe early 30s if he was like 10 or
Maybe
11 when they went to the, because
Mhm.
it was 20 years
right.
after he was killed. So he could have been 10,
Yeah, 8 to
maybe.
10 was my range
Right.
Yeah.
for him.
Right.
No older
But
than 10 for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. No older than 10.
So my whole thought process about like I think again it was the music and the hair. The music and the hair is what was like emo, emo, emo. And I think that without those things, the performance is not doesn't read as My Chemical Romance. um
Gotcha.
in the
Yeah.
same way, like I hear what you're saying, but it didn't bother me because I think they set up enough for me to understand why he's still at this point, why he's so sophisticated in a lot of his crime fighting or his ability to do melee type attacks. Like that fight with the clowns at the beginning was
Mhm.
really good, because he just
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom,
Yeah,
boom,
that was
boom.
awesome.
That was great. Um I think that it was the tone that was set that is making people come, because you're not the only one, I'm sure, who thinks that by any means,
Yeah,
and I see it too.
and I think another thing that was just a little bit confusing for me
Hmm.
in the Bruce Wayne thing was that people responded to him like he was the playboy billionaire. Like they were fans of Bruce Wayne, even though he was portraying this very reclusive, never really does any philanthropy, never really stays in his house all the time,
Yeah.
doesn't want to go to board meetings, doesn't want to see people, but he's still treated like a rock star when he's out and when he goes to the funeral and people are like, "Oh
Hmm.
my God, it's Bruce Wayne! It's Bruce Wayne!" It's like I haven't seen him do anything to be that kind of a symbol
It's
for the
true.
people.
I can respond to that, but Thomas, you looked like you had something to say.
Yeah. I was gonna say that for me, I actually love the Bruce Wayne because we're meeting him at a time that I don't think we've met other Bruce Waynes before in terms of
Hmm.
them on film. So what I saw was you saw this basically like the Joker says in the animated series, you're just a little boy crying for mommy and daddy to come home. And he was literally a boy. And I think the hair being disheveled, like he clearly doesn't do, probably don't take many showers, things like that, unless Alfred throws him in the shower type thing. And I felt like one of the beautiful moments was the cufflink scene when he was
Mm.
like, I don't want your cufflinks. And he looked at him like, you're still Rain, put this mess on, and it just, to me, those little things represented that. Like his physicality, I said, Robert Pattinson, man, his physicality when he was Batman and how it affects him when he's Bruce Wayne, I thought that he kept that world because he was so beaten. And when
He
he's
is.
just walking
Just,
around, you could tell he's still feeling like I've been up all night. Where it just didn't feel like I'm Bruce Wayne now. Which I think in a sequel, if they're going to justify the choices for this, they've got to go to where, okay, this is the Bruce Wayne we've been seeing before. Like we need to see him look like Tenant Robert Pattinson. I need to see the hair done, debonair. How is he going to put on the Bruce Wayne mask in a way?
right. And
Right.
to
Yeah,
directly answer you, Michael, I think that the reason why I don't think they think of him as a playboy. I think they think of him as Thomas Wayne's son. And
yeah,
so Thomas Wayne's son, this man who means he is God to Gotham. He's
Yeah.
God to Gotham, and he meant so much to the community. The promise, what was the actual thing called?
Renewal.
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 Thank you. The
Hmm.
renewal thing, and he died tragically in his run for mayor. He's a legend at this point. So when they finally see his son for the first time in like 20 years or something like that, or at least 10, let's say, maybe Alfred has taken him out to FAO Schwartz every once in a while to go pick up some toys.
Right.
But for the most part, this is the first time they've seen him. This is like Harry Potter effect, right? They haven't seen Harry Potter in 10 years. No one's seen him. And the minute he comes into Diagon Alley, people are like, it's the same thing. James and Lily Potter did this wonderful thing, and you're Harry Potter, and you did this thing. Like it just becomes uh in the same way that that the Riddler tells him he is responsible for the sins of his father, the rest of Gotham sees him as responsible for the gains and success of his father.
Mm.
um so I think that that's a lot of where that aspect of it
Hmm.
comes from. And I think that they're probably going to go in a Court of Owls direction
Hmm.
with any subsequent uh movies.
I
And
heard Matt Reeves wants to do a grounded take on Dr. Freeze, which is very, very, I don't know how you do that. So that's
well,
very interesting to me.
this is my thing
Mm.
about any Batman villain, because they were also talking about Clayface. They were also talking about Man Bat. Yeah, Man Bat. I think that all of these things are grounded in some sense of reality. Because they make sure that, like Man Bat, it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He took a potion and he transformed. Clayface, he got smushed all the clay, changed his body chemistry, and now he's this. Dr. Freeze, same basic thing. So it's scientific. If they explain the science in world enough, I think it is grounded in reality.
Right.
You don't have to be like, it's magic, because sometimes magic appears. We have Mordred and Morgan Le Fay that pop up, and King Arthur and his court, and Etrigan and demons and all those kind of things, but that's a separate kind. That's actually fantastical. The other stuff, when you have Doc Ock in Spider-Man, you have Norman Osborn injecting himself with the rat, whatever, like that's all based in some sense of scientific realism in the world of the movie or TV show or whatever.
Exactly.
So I don't think it's unrealistic to have a Dr. Freeze, but what the is it Batman and Robin or Batman
Yes.
Forever?
Batman and Robin.
Batman and Robin.
Freeze, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
So yeah, so Batman and Robin, I think the reason why that didn't succeed in the same way that this kind of take can is that you need to focus. It makes me so sad when I watch Batman the animated series. Dr. Freeze makes me so sad. He's so sad, just him crying in his cell because he just wants his wife back.
Right.
You know, that's all he wants. That's all he's focused on. So if you focus on the human and the humanity, because the Riddler had humanity, he is out of his mind, but he had a humanity where he felt like he was sold a bill of goods that never ended up happening. And so if I think that I would love for them to explore a better version of Dr. Freeze. You know, who would be really good in that? What's his name from Kingsman would be really good. / he's Lucius Malfoy. What's his actual name? I was
Jason Isaacs.
Yeah, Jason Isaacs would be so good.
I could see also Mark Strong, who's also in the Kingsman series.
Oh, I think maybe that's who I'm thinking of. Or were they both?
One that was in Kick-Ass.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. He's great. Those are all great choices. There's so many great, like, kind of stoic men who then, that's why I hated Gotham so much. They introduced Dr. Freeze and I said, what the fuck is happening? What is happening? Why is this happening? You have to establish a very firm, like, basis, not just in reality, but just a structure and a foundation for all of these villains, so they don't just come out of nowhere and like they're like, gang, poo, 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 poo. Like, time to fight.
This world makes me very interested in like where they could go with all these villains, because there's so many unexplored stories in the Batman's Rogues Gallery that just seeing what they could do in this really super grounded reality, and you know, and how they could tell those stories, because they would have to focus on the humanity of the characters, and I think that makes for a much more compelling narrative than, you know, somebody that can just use a freeze gun and make all kinds of ice stuff. You know, I've seen that. I don't really want to see that again. I would rather see, you know, the motivations behind it. And yeah. Speaking of Rogues Gallery, how do we feel about the Joker, the Joker thing at the scene at the end?
Well, technically, it says unnamed prisoner.
Matt Reeves has said it's Joker. He confirmed it.
He confirmed it.
He's literally listed as it in the credits. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, obviously, I'm interested because from what I could tell from the darkness, his face is just scarred, like it's just fully scarred. So I'm interested to see what that looks like in the light. And not obviously, what I think is going to end up happening with whoever. I know who the actor is, but what I think is going to happen is that he's going to put on the makeup to cover the scars. Which is interesting to me. It's a slightly different take than we've seen before, because Heath Ledger just had the one on his mouth. His mouth looked really crazy though.
Yeah, it was jacked
I was like, whoa.
Everything looked crazy. Everything looked crazy. The hair looked crazy. The nose looked crazy. The mouth looked crazy. He was, it all looked crazy to me.
I hope they're going for what's the Killing Joke.
Yeah, Killing Joke.
I hope they're going for. I think they're going for that angle, because theoretically, when what's his name falls into the vat of acid, is it in Batman's first year?
It's happened so many different ways that
I know, but in the Killing Joke specifically,
That I couldn't tell you. I don't
I
know.
think it's the first year. Don't quote me on that, but it's early enough on that it could have happened. So we're in year two. It could have happened in year one, and then this man just stark raving mad on the street. They throw him into jail because he's done something, but not enough to become the Joker yet.
Mhm.
Right.
So he's locked up in the asylum and is watching, just like the Riddler is watching what the Riddler did and watching what Batman is doing, what he's done. And now that he's become a hero, the Joker's like, no, not this, because this man fucked up my face. So we're gonna fight. But so I'm very I'm excited. I'm excited. I loved Joaquin Phoenix, but I am excited for another in-world Joker for the first time, because I think rather than just being a random dude, I do like there to be a little bit of a history, like a little bit of a like, oh, that's what kind of happened to him. And we
Yeah.
don't need to get into like the details of it, but the Joker, that Killing Joke stuff, is really sad with the wife and the pregnancy, and then
Mhm.
he lost his wife, he lost everything, and then was going to lose his life, and then Batman destroyed his life in a different way. So, and of course Joker has to get his revenge on the mafia people that
Yep.
effed him over. So there's a lot to explore there.
Hmm.
And so that I'm excited about it. I don't know how y'all feel about it.
No, I'm super excited for it. That's why I say it's like this mini series for me. I'm like, what's next? And I think Arkham is going to be probably play a big part of what they're going to do. I think I could see them bringing in Hugo Strange. I could see
Hmm.
them Harley Quinn. I think they could bring in a version with her. Seeing her tap into the psyche of these people. Actually, what I say is, I think it's interesting. You can see in a slew of doctors that go bad. You can see Pamela Ivy. I
But
think,
that's yes.
I think that might be interesting too, especially if Bruce is going to like take up the mantle of Wayne Enterprises and push it into the forefront with technology and working with other, like maybe a Lucius Fox or something. Like, I think you might start seeing how science is trying to be the answer to cure Gotham, and how
Yes.
that flips on its head.
Right.
You
Hmm.
know? Hmm.
That's always my big thing. Like I said with Spider-Man before, Spider-Man has scientists, Batman has doctors. All of these doctors who are trying to do good for the world, who end up getting corrupted
Yep.
by the environment. Gotham is so bad that it makes good people do heinous things.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's the power of Gotham as a character in and of itself.
Hmm.
So yeah, I agree. Michael, what do you think about the Joker and
I
all of
found it to
that?
be it was I didn't see it coming. I will say that. I did not expect them to introduce the Joker this early on. Um, so uh, I think it's a great card to have in your
Yeah.
back pocket. You know that you've got this guy, whether you introduce him in the next movie or in some other form or fashion, he's there. And just the presence of a Joker in the universe like raises the stakes. Like just the fact that that you've got this wild card character who can cause my only my only question is, how do you make Joker crazier than the Riddler was? Because the Riddler was insane.
Well,
So, but
that's
he
my thing.
sounded
Yeah.
calm next to the Riddler, which in itself is kind of scary. Like a calm
Yeah.
Joker, like a calm, like uh, like actually calculated. Calm probably isn't the right word, but just like a simmering Joker who's
Composed.
not like outwardly like crazy.
He's
That
Hmm.
could
composed.
be terrifying as hell. Like
Yeah.
that could be really, really
It,
something to like an entirely new take. Because all of the Jokers to this point have been so eccentric and crazy.
yeah.
What happens if there's a Joker who's really like just below the
I
surface?
I could see them doing a very Hannibal Lecter version type. I mean, like,
Oh, interesting.
he can, because the thing about the Joker, he's just a step ahead of the curve. Like, he's just always like, he's the one you like. It's never simple with the Joker. It's like he's always got something else going on. And
Hmm.
I could see which is interesting because Matt Reeves talked about they had a scene where Batman was going to go to Arkham and talk to this guy, but you never see him. He's just kind of like hiding back in the shadows. And this is very like Clarice Sterling, Hannibal Lecter type
Yeah.
scene. And he was like, that technically was the Joker. You know, you kind of find out at the end. And I was like,
Yeah.
probably
Like
good move,
Hannibal
maybe
Lecter. Yeah,
cutting it.
Hannibal Lecter, like a Hannibal
Yeah.
Lecter-esque Joker.
Yeah.
Whew.
Scary.
That's
Because I
crazy
mean,
to
that guy's
think about.
crazy as it is, but he's just like you said, he's
Focus.
intelligent and focused. And that
Yeah.
is scary.
But
Yeah.
that's the thing about the Joker in general. Yes, we have Mark Hamill, but even with Mark Hamill's version, what I find to be the most engaging thing about the Joker is that the Joker is smart. He is very intelligent. He's not a
Mhm.
fucking dummy.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like it's just when put in certain situations, he loses his actual mind because he can speak very sweetly. He's very charming.
Mhm.
That's a huge part of or at least of Mark Hamill's Joker, is that he's very charming and very sweet. That's how he can talk to Harleen Quinzel and convince her that he loves her. That's how he can
Mhm.
talk his way probably out of a paper bag. But the thing is, he has triggers.
Yeah.
And Batman is a big trigger. And then people not finding him funny is also a trigger. Like
Mhm.
those are the things. The Riddler thought he was funny, so they're friends. They're good.
Yeah.
They understand each other. I think the Riddler was crazier in the traditional sense of the word, like, oh, he's crazy, he's doing a lot of crazy stuff. But the Joker is a homicidal maniac. You never know where you stand with him.
Mhm.
Period.
Right.
The Riddler has a code, Joker does not.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between them. I also, before speaking of Arkham, the fact that they made Martha Wayne in Arkham blew my fucking mind.
Yes.
I literally was like,
Yeah.
is this canon in any world? It's not. And I was like, I love this though.
Yeah.
Because it reminded me of Arkham Asylum, the game. Because you learn all the history of the Arkhams and yada yada yada, and the Amadeus Arkham or whatever his name is killed his wife and child and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, so she's crazy from a crazy family, and it's like it's like Bruce's not capabilities. Bruce's mental state is hereditary.
Mm.
Mhm. That's
Mhm.
interesting to think
Which is
about.
such an interesting thing for them to explore, because you're like, oh well, his parents died, so he's sad and depressed and blah 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 blah. But for it to be a hereditary thing is and something that he clearly has not seen any therapists
Right.
during this time for the last 20 years. Or let's say he saw a therapist, but maybe a therapist betrayed 8-year-old, 9-year-old Bruce Wayne, and so he didn't trust anybody ever again. There's so many different ways you can go about that, especially with Thomas caring so much for his wife that he ruined his political career and eventually his life. I think
Yeah.
that the whole Arkham of it all was so fascinating, and I was very
Mhm.
happy. I also thought it was interesting because it's not Arkham Asylum in this world, or at least in this time period. They have changed it to Arkham State Hospital, because asylum is an outdated word. It's not very PC, yada 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 yada.
Right.
So I was interested, like I could tell the thought process, like, should we still call this Arkham Asylum? Probably not. Okay, let's change that.
Mhm.
Like, it was very conscious effort on their part. So yeah, I'm just really, because that could go so many places. Because if did Bruce know his mother was in Arkham? Did he know? He clearly didn't know she was crazy.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Didn't seem like he
Mm-mm.
didn't know that.
So
That was
even
a
if he knew,
surprise to all of us.
right.
Mhm.
So even if right. So even if he knew that she was in Arkham, he clearly hasn't looked up his family history enough to understand that. So it might be a lot of him understanding the history of his own mental illnesses, or his family's mental illness, and just that could be interesting too, in an attempt to understand in some way, shape, or form the people that he incidentally ends up creating because of his invention of the Batman.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot to explore. But my God, I was like, the
I'm just glad they've
connected.
given it somewhere to go. Like
Right.
they've set it up in such a way that there are so many different roads that they could take with it, and all
Mm-hmm.
of them are fascinating to me. So
Right.
Yes.
that's the thing. It stands on its own. It's a movie that stands on its own, but still gives you enough threads that it's
Mm-hmm.
like, man, they could go so many places with it. And as a Batman fan, that's what we've been waiting for. That's what I've been waiting for. It's
A
just a
Oh
long
story that
yeah.
time.
can actually plumb the depths of this character and give us some things that we maybe haven't seen or thought about with him before. And
Right.
so this is exciting for me.
Because the
You
thing
know,
about
I was
Batman, oh
oh
no,
yeah.
go.
No, I was just gonna say that to me it was like the Casino Royale of a Batman mythology.
Mm,
Like
Mm,
hmm
what Daniel Craig did with his version of James Bond, he introduced the multi-layered hero. And we come to know James Bond's like, oh, is this, and this. But when Daniel Craig stepped into it, it was like, oh, wait a minute, he's emotional, he makes mistakes,
Right.
and you see his journey. And I think that that's what so excites me about this. Even with Selena Kyle, like you're getting this well-rounded woman, and you're gonna be like, where does she go now? And I love that she goes her own way, and I hope that they continue with her journey as well as his in some fashion. Because I'm like Bloodhaven, what in the world is over there? Now I'm curious. Like we got this other
see,
like
like
world,
Bloodhaven is New Jersey.
right? That's the New Jersey, right? And I was like, she's like, oh, it's gonna be bad here in Gotham. I'm all like, girl, you going Bloodhaven, boy? You got
Are we going
okay.
to Bloodhaven?
You
Nah, I
going
ain't going over
Bloodhaven?
there.
See,
I don't
Nah.
go
Nightwing be
on
trying
that
to
side
run
of the
back to
river.
Gotham from Bloodhaven. He's like, hey man, what you doing, Bats? I need help. Do something. And so I'm just like,
You
yeah,
better
it's
strap up. You're
just
going to
like
Bloodhaven. Shit.
I'm telling you. That's why I was like, yeah, she gonna come back and Batman gonna be like, dang, what happened? And she's like, full woman now, baby. So I think they just got, like you said, Michael, they got so many avenues that they can go that I mean I'm sure they're gonna have a lot of fun playing with it. They're already talking about the spin-off series and things they're gonna do. So I'm just like, man, stick to your approach, stay true to
Yeah.
what you want to do, and don't get too caught up in all the noise because there's gonna be a lot of noise around it. I just
So
hope
much
that,
noise.
yeah, Matt Reeves and them, they just stay true to what they want to do and tell that story and don't get caught up in like fans want this. So it's like just we trust
Yeah.
you, man. Just do your
Let
job.
us
Do what you
let us
want.
pray to the comic book gods that Warner Brothers stays out of the way
I'm telling you,
Stays out of
please
it.
and
don't get
just
in there.
lets the story be told. Just leave it
Right.
alone.
Leave
You
it
don't need to
alone.
touch it.
Right.
It's in a good place. It's going good places. Just let him do his thing.
Don't try
Yeah,
to
man.
tell him what villains need to be in it. Don't try to tell them that Bruce needs to figure this out by a certain time. Just let people do what they do.
And
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
from one aspect, I'm even as confusing as the DC extended universe can be and is because of what it is. I'm actually kind of grateful that this is separate from it. And I
Yes.
Right.
don't know what they're going to do with the Flash movie. I don't know. I'm sure they're going to retcon a lot of things. I'm sure they're going to,
It's gonna be like
reset the
Days of Future
universe in a lot
Past.
of
It's gonna be
ways.
bad.
Yeah, but I'm actually I'm really glad that this movie is separate from that, also somehow separate from the Joker, the universe that the Joker
Mm-hmm.
is in. I just think of them as different Earths, and I'm just glad that this Earth is separated from, what's happening in the extended universe right now, because maybe they will just let it be its own thing and tell its own versions of stories and not worry about how they can tie it into the world as a whole, because it doesn't work. Like, it wouldn't work. This
Mm-mm.
Batman
Mm-mm.
does not work in the same world as Aquaman and Flash and Superman. And the world that they
Mm-mm.
inhabit, this Batman does not work there. So I hope that they don't, connive some way to get it all in the same place, because it wouldn't make sense.
Mm-mm.
No. So yeah, I'm really excited about the future. I also think, as you said, there are many threads that they can take, but So far, so good, knock on wood, that they
Mhm.
understand those threads
Hmm.
and will be able to follow them to completion without depending on, for example, like Heath Ledger and Joker, like, oh, Joker, we have Joker. And then Heath Ledger died and they were like, oh, fuck, what do we do with this last movie? And then they
Right.
didn't know what to do. And they kind of just stuffed people into there, and Bane and Boop and Talia. And I was like, too much. We're doing
Yeah.
too much. Why is
Yeah.
Selena here? I don't understand. So it's gonna be, I think it's going to be good. I'm cautiously optimistic. I do give this a 9, and I stand by, as I said, that I think that this is my favorite live action Batman, if nothing else for the totality of the experience that it brought. Because I think it's important that the Batman be the feature in his own story, because it's really about the rogues gallery and how they affect him, how
Mhm.
they call to some part of him. Riddler calls to his brain. Joker calls to, he's like, they're the exact opposite at some level. But still have so much in common that it makes Bruce uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Selena is like a sexy surprise. Selena's a sexy surprise. You have Pamela, who, like Thomas and Martha Wayne, trying to be a philanthropist, trying to be a good person, ends up not being so. And so that's the reason why Batman's rogues gallery exists for him, so he can, I think I've said it before, it's kind of like go toe to toe with himself mentally every day and hope that he wins at the end of the day.
Right.
Hmm.
And hope that he wins and that he still ends up doing right. Even if he is like, oh, I understand why you're doing this, or I understand, even if he understands internally, that he's still like, nope, I have to protect this city. This city needs me, and this city is dust without me. So let me still stay the course and do what I know to be right. Um, Unlike his father before him, in the last like 20 years of Thomas Wayne, has been a lot of like, Thomas Wayne ain't shit. so so yeah, so I'm excited, and I'm so happy that we were able to have this conversation today.
Yeah.
And talk some Batman. You know, I could talk about that Batman for like 6 hours. I have my coffee table book at home, and I just read it sometimes to be like, there were 6 different clay faces. Anyway, but if you could start introducing us out, Michael.
My name is Michael Andreas. You can find me on Instagram at Michael_Andreas. And you can also find me touring the country in Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations. So, yeah.
Nice. And I'm Thomas Brazel. And you can find me online on Instagram at tbrazeldazzle. And you can find me in Atlanta, Georgia, in and out of the film scene here. And I'm working with Out of Hand Theater right now on a vaccine confidence project in Georgia.
And as always, I'm Zuri Washington. You can find me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. Please let us know your thoughts on the new Batman. Please, and anything. Tell us if you hated it, if you loved it. I disagree with you if you hated it, but that's okay. I will listen to all the opinions. Follow the podcast on IG at Supa Black Podcast, or you can follow us on Twitter at Supa Podcast. And don't forget, should you need heroes, we've got your back. We fear no topic we attack. If conversation is what you lack, you'll find it here with Supa Black. Bye. Hey there, this is your current day friendly neighborhood host, and these are the conventions that are on the horizon. Every episode, we will be highlighting upcoming cons in the hopes that some of our listeners out there will be able to attend in person or online. This week, we want to give a shout out to 2. First up is Toronto Comic-Con, which is happening in person from Friday, March 18th to Sunday, March 20th in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. For more information, check out fanexpohq.com/Comic-Con Toronto. The second con is La Mole Comic Convention in Mexico City, Mexico, which you can check out next weekend from Friday, March 25th to Sunday, March 27th. For more information, go to lamole.com.mx. Para mis amigos en México, la segunda con es la Mole Comic Convention que está pasando en Mexico City, 25 de marzo a 27 de marzo. Para más información, ir a lamole.com.mx. Mask up and be safe. Hope to see you there.